All right, welcome to the campfire.
Thanks, Mike.
So I know a lot of your background actually plays in a lot with the kind of work that I do because I like to emphasize the idea of changing the story of self-suffering into the hero's journey kind of story based off of meditation, connecting with the land. And ultimately, it all comes down to the idea of taking responsibility for yourself, your patterns, your feelings, and learning how to befriend all of that. So, can you talk to me a little bit about maybe what brought you into that kind of an understanding to be able to facilitate that kind of work?
Like my life, my life experience, and wanting to be happier and more successful, uh, was the reason why I learned anything that I've learned. And I guess I would go back to say there's two ways that most people look at the world. And if this is oversimplifying, I'm sorry, but it really is only two ways. So anyone who's listening, if you can identify with one versus the other, I recommend one versus the other, but you do get a choice. But one is by default most of the time because what we learn from our parents and what we see happen in the world. And that one is a victim mentality where we believe that things just happen to us. We don't have any, we don't have any responsibility about them. We didn't attract them. We didn't choose them in any way, shape, or form. And therefore, if something bad happens, it's somebody else's fault. If I'm upset, it must be because you said something mean or did something bad to hurt me. And that would be called victim mentality. And again, it's pretty prevalent in everywhere because no one's taught you anything different. And no one's given you a framework to understand a different way. And I can even teach it in terms of an extremely scientific way to even sort of prove that there is an attraction piece, there is a vibration and a frequency piece to this. And of course, you know it when you come out into nature, because anyone who lives in the world and works a job or has a family or runs a business or works for somebody else, and you have that sort of scattered energy, and then you go sit around a campfire in the forest or go sit on the sand at the beach, what happens? Your nervous system relaxes and you get centered and you get grounded and you were reminded of who you are and that life can be just one breath at a time. But we forget that when we're in the spin of circumstance and story and desire and disappointment and all the things that happen emotionally, because most of us are not taught ever how to process emotions or how even emotions work. So that's sort of how I've gotten into it, because I've wanted to better my life, be happy, be successful, have successful relationships, and feel good.
I think back as I listen about my journey and just how much of that I used to live within that victim mindset and story, but I put a mask over it because I was uncomfortable with experiencing and feeling all those things, for the lack of being taught how to process all of that. So yeah, it did come down to a matter of it being it through that set of lenses, everybody else's fault. But then came that shift in that moment where you realize that that pattern, it continues to go in the same circle and get you nowhere. So you're just spinning your wheels, and it becomes time to learn a new set of vocabulary words to define your interaction with the world. And those are some of the most challenging things that all of us get stuck with at the very beginning of any sort of growth or healing journey, is learning how to identify those words and learning how to make them a part of ourselves. And coming out into nature, as I do with many people all the time, to show them examples of, say, the way that a deer interacts with the world around it and how it can apply to you. There's no victim mentality there when eventually it becomes dinner. It just lived and made the most of the time that it had, brought you present and into the moment. And I feel like those are some of the things that, as we move through even the concrete world, we're able to easily identify if we're open to the experience.
Oh, absolutely. And again, and it's not something that you're taught, so you have to find it. I think it really becomes that you're attracted to and you ask questions. I'm a very curious person. I've always asked questions. So you have to, there's a knowing, a deep knowing that there's got to be more than this. This can't just be the way it is. There has to be something better. There has to be a different way to think about this or be, or, how come some people have those things and get to do those things and other people don't? Like there has to be in your mind, I think for many people, like a little bit of a seeker, someone who's curious, who understands that there's a lot of different scenarios, and then just say, but why? How does one get to be like that versus like that? And that's where I didn't really finish the sentence, but the two ways of looking at things is one as a victim and one as you're 100% responsible for how you show up in this life and that you even chose this life for yourself. So it's not just about law of attraction in that whatever I think about, I believe and manifest, because you'll get whatever you are. We manifest all the time, and it's literally science. It's quantum physics. It's not a belief system. It's not a religion. It's not even spirituality. It literally is quantum physics. But so you just attract, you see what you are, things that are like you, things that support your belief systems, the way that you're looking at things. I'm sure everyone has had a situation where you thought you lost your keys and you're looking and looking and looking because you believed you've misplaced your keys. So you're looking and you cannot find your keys because you believe you've misplaced your keys. And then the minute you get out of that belief system and you like disconnect from it and you come back, they're exactly where you put them. And you're like, oh, they were right here the whole time. That's what I'm talking about. That's the difference of your belief system. Initially, the fear said, I don't know where I put my keys. I've misplaced them. So of course, you're not going to be in alignment with seeing the keys because you believe you've misplaced them. So if you can take responsibility, and here's the thing, it's not to shame or blame anybody that any bad things that have happened to you are because you're not good enough, you're not smart enough, you did something wrong, you're a bad person. No, 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 none of that. Taking responsibility for everything, literally everything, even how people react to you to a certain degree. You don't make up for what they're doing because you can't control what they're doing, but what you're emanating, what you're putting out there, they're responding to. So you're responsible for that energy that you're putting out there. But if you can take responsibility for everything, then what happens is you feel powerful. You feel empowered to make a different choice because there's something you can do about it. You can change it. If you're in victim and you just believe that stuff happens and you have nothing to do with it, it gives you no power. You'll never feel powerful. You'll never feel more than slightly content in that frame of mind. You can't be happy. Why could you? Because anything could happen. If you're a victim, anything could happen at any time. So I tend to choose to take responsibility for as much as I possibly can, and then see in that if there's any choice I can make to change it because it feels good. Feels good and it works. So those are the two choices.
Well, I think it gets down to a lot of exactly what we're taught. You just follow the simple framework of you go to school, then you grow up, you get a job, you get married, you get the white picket fence. And it makes life feel very bland, right? And then you have an event that happens along that road where in my case it was looking in the rear view mirror and seeing every single thing had always brought me back to that one spot where I was the victim. And just like with the analogy of finding your keys when you lose them, you get caught up in the frenzy. So of course, you lose power because you're not being aware of the fact that you have a decision to make as far as what your next step's going to be. You just kind of look around for somebody else to either give you the answer or push you in another direction. And I think that ties in a lot to our self-worth and our self-value system is it comes from all the different pieces of the world that we interact with and how the reaction is projected toward us. If we bring it back to sitting in the truck looking in that rearview mirror, learning how to change that and step outside of that frenzy, we realize that that is an opinion that we can't change. We have no control over it. However, what we do with the feedback, how it helps us to become informed, we get to make that next positive decision to break that cycle and step into something new,
Absolutely.
which then brings us to that scary part, the new, the unexpected.
Well, are there things that you want? And are there people that you know that want things that they don't have and that they've never had?
Well, of course. I
Okay,
mean,
right. So we have to, so when we want something that we have never had before, we have to grow into the person who knows how to receive it.
this is very true. This is the part of the journey that a lot of us overlook because we get caught up in we're here, we want that, but we forget about all the steps in between. So it's actually the journey, not the destination, that is more important. Because a lot of the time along that journey, those goals or those destinations, they change.
Absolutely. In fact, they're good catalysts. Sometimes you are headed in one direction and something happens and it pivots you in a different direction and it was supposed to because you thought you wanted one thing and then you quickly learned, oh, maybe I don't want that thing. Maybe that isn't what's going to bring me peace and joy and happiness. Maybe I need to find peace and joy and happiness in myself first and then think about what makes sense or what I want or how, what's comfortable, what makes sense in my lifestyle, how much do I want to grow? How much do I want to become a new person?
And as you think about it in that sort of framework, how far do I want to go? You got to kind of give yourself that grace to understand that it doesn't have to be as far as somebody else or in that same direction. It's intended to be specifically for you with what you're comfortable with. So you don't get caught up in the just spinning your wheels or the burnout or the giving up aspect of it. You actually look at it piece by piece and you're able to build a staircase toward whether it ends up being that original goal or shifting off to something else.
Definitely.
But I've come to discover that flexibility is one of the key points in life because you have to be open to not only the environment around you, but the resources that are there.
Yeah, I would say flexibility, I would agree. People don't know how to be flexible because they don't understand their needs or even how to process emotion. So let's back up a second and talk about that for a second because I think we can't really make a big impact without sort of assuming that everybody interprets things the same way, right? When you have a negative emotion, it's because a need is not being met or a perception of a need is not being met. So you may think, like in the case of relationships, let's say there are two people and one partner's love language is touch and the other one's is acts of service. So the one who is in touch might be really mad and feeling sad and rejected and make up this story about not being good enough and not looking good enough for their partner not to touch them more. But their partner's love language is acts of service. So it's like we're speaking two different languages. And so in this case, the partner with the love language of touch might think, well, my need isn't being met. And therefore, I'm going to make up a story about it and I'm going to be upset about it. And then maybe I don't talk about it. Maybe I get depressed about it. But really, it's just a simple understanding that I have a need and the need is for connection. And I prefer it to be through touch. Well, my partner is trying to make connection, but doing it through acts of service. And if I could just bridge the gap of conversation and communication, understand that I'm getting love every day, I'm just not receiving it because it's not in the way that I want it. Oh, so he actually does love me. He does care about me. He does think about me. He wants, or who she, whatever, it doesn't matter. But this is a situation where we don't have a vocabulary of needs. We just have feelings and then we don't know what to do with them. And I actually teach this. I mean, not that anybody, if anybody wants to play along, I actually teach this and have like a little handout on feelings and needs. But the whole premise is that we all have 86 basic human needs. And so when you're upset, sitting in the upset, telling the same story about the upset is not uncovering why you're upset. It doesn't actually get to the real need of the situation. So if you can, like in that case of what that couple needed, well, the partner who wants touch is looking for connection and looking for love, but they're looking for love and they're getting love. They're just not getting it the way they wanted to. So the easy strategy is to ask for, hey, two things. One, they could say, oh, I noticed that you're doing these acts of service. Is this your way of showing love for me? Oh, yes. Okay. So you can choose to feel the love, or you can say, you know what? The acts of service that you do for me, I really appreciate that, but that's not my like love language. And what would feel really, really good and really, really meaningful to me is if you could hug me more or hold my hand once in a while or have more sex with me, whatever. I mean, sex really isn't under the category of touch, believe it or not, in the love language framework, but because everybody across the board likes sex, touch means more of the like holding you and like massaging your shoulders, rubbing your back. It's that kind of non-sexual touch that shows love when someone's love language is touch. But we all have needs, and most people have not been taught to care or to think about or to identify what needs they have. And so then we get stuck in this loop of, well, it's a story. It's just a story. You tell a story. Most of the stories that we tell are not true because they're one-sided, and we all make it all up in our head. We made up what that person would say and why and what that like. It's just all a bunch. It's not even real. Do you realize, you, Mike? But like, does everyone realize like how much upset you've created around stories that you've made assumptions about in your head about that's not even true? But that person thinks of you like this, and that's why they did this. Like, did you ask them that? So I'm a big fan of teaching people about their needs so they have some place to start. That if you're not feeling well, you're not feeling good, you're stuck, you're frustrated, and someone doesn't know where to begin, I'll say, well, grab your feelings and needs list and just go straight down to the needs, forget the story, and just start circling any of the needs on this list that you're not getting met that are important to you. Now, if in the case of like some people, I'm just going to pick one, beauty or consciousness. If someone doesn't need consciousness, then don't circle it. But if you need humor and you're not getting it, or you need empathy and you're not getting it, you need rest and space and you're not getting it, like these are really important things. And you're going to react in life differently when a bunch of these needs aren't being met. You're not going to be a happy camper.
It's definitely something that takes a lot of going inward and learning how to be comfortable with having the conversation with yourself first, though, before you can express it. And I feel like as you start to develop that practice and start to befriend yourself, you start to really then understand and engage with those stories you're telling yourself. You challenge them. And then it starts to blossom into a voice that you can express towards your partner. And as you start to express towards your partner and you have these conversations, they get difficult and they get challenging at times, but that's really the lumber that builds the bridge to get you guys across that river together. And sometimes, as we get caught up in those stories, it's not always a two-way street that this bridge starts getting built. It doesn't get built on both sides of the river at the same time. So you really got to look internally and decide if that relationship is important enough to you to be the one to pick up the hammer and to start building that bridge so that eventually you say you have the right conversation and it brings your partner back in line with you, because those things, those sort of just different disconnects, they can be the triggering point that ultimately causes the relationship to go unhealthy and die. And as we get back to even the beginning of this conversation where we talked about those stories and getting out of the victim mindset, you got to do these things, you got to do the work. It doesn't come just magically to your doorstep, all the solutions. You got to go out and dig them up.
Yeah. I don't know how far you got to dig. You don't got to dig too far for this stuff. I mean, some of the other stuff I do, you got to dig pretty far. But like the need thing, it's just an awareness, because I think it is pretty basic, and to be able to understand, it's just a new vocabulary. It's a new vocabulary to understand why I'm frustrated. Oh, because I have a need. Like I work with a lot of people who want to make a bigger impact in the world, but don't know how, or don't give themselves the time or permission to do so. So they have a need to contribute. So they show up in other people's groups, or they show up in other places, and they talk a lot, and they want to share, and they want to teach others, even though they may be the student in the group, right? That would be an indicator that that person has a voice and they want to share that voice and they want to contribute. So create an outlet for you to contribute. And it doesn't have to be you start your own business. It could be that you do things for free, or that you volunteer in places. But it's a real need. when you feel like you have something to share with people, I mean, it's why we're doing this podcast, right? Because we both have a need to contribute. Otherwise, you could be doing something different right now. I mean, other than just sitting in your campfire, you could just be enjoying the campfire without having a conversation. You could be, just relaxing and meditating, or listening to some music, or planning your next meal or making a meal. So it's really important that we understand that we have needs, and that it's our responsibility to get those needs met, and nobody else's. And more important, to identify the needs so that you don't keep repeating the same patterns, and you don't wonder why you're not happy, or you don't wonder why you're frustrated, or you wonder why you're sad, because you're not getting your needs met and you don't even know what they are. So as humans, we will manipulate others to get our needs met until it works unconsciously. We don't know what we're doing. We're just trying things out until we get the right response, which is a certain feeling. But we can bypass that if we just get a little aware, ask a few questions.
That's actually in the list of things that I could be doing right now. Brings up a very interesting point, because it was through just the list of things that I could be doing that I discovered meditation. And we all have some form of meditation practices that we do within the list of things that we do throughout the day. It's just becoming aware of it, just like, the idea of becoming aware of your needs. And if you're looking for an easy way to figure out what those needs are so that you're able to communicate them, you can look at that list of things that you could be doing instead of listening to this podcast, or what you're doing throughout the day, and realize that 9 out of 10 of those things speak to training some kind of ability within you that manifest has those needs. Like for me, a good example of that would be when I developed my meditation practice. I spent years and years and years of shooting and hunting. And lo and behold, those were the two key pieces to how my meditation practice became, or got going, once I became aware of the actual art of meditation, which altogether fed into my need for time to self-reflect. My need to go inward, and that's how I find relaxation, and that's how I continue to keep my circle balanced. But had I not become aware of any of that and started to build that new vocabulary, none of that probably would have ever come together. And those are the kind of things that are so important to point out to people: is every step that you're trying to take has already been done within the steps that you've already taken. It's just a matter of taking the time to look back and reflect on it.
Yeah. Just like there are many ways to do, like there are many ways to do many things, right? And um, when we get stopped in fear or apprehension about something new or too much or overwhelmed, I think it's a very grounding thought to remember what you just said in terms of looking back and taking a minute and being like dropping in, getting grounded, being present.
It's like the idea that, we keep going back to the idea of looking to somebody else to give us something. But when you think about the feeling of bravery or the feeling of perseverance, nobody can hand those to you. Those are already gifts that are within your heart, and they only become stronger the more times that you actually put them to the stone to sharpen them. And that goes for every aspect of life. As much as we walk the circle around the theme of the conversation, what we're doing is we're providing that stone for somebody to sit down at and pull these different skills and techniques out of themselves as if it was a knife, and sit down and actually sharpen it to begin to apply it and utilize the resources that are around them, because they're actually building this new framework and this new vocabulary to better understand where all these different resources fall into place.
Yeah, I agree.
So let's do this as we start to kind of wind down our conversation. If someone was to come to you in that frenzy where their life is just out of control. They want to collect and find their new vocabulary to not only define their needs, but it put them in play in their life. Where would you start them off? What kind of advice would you give them?
Well, I would have them download this sheet, first of all. So it's a JJ Flizane. You can't find this on my website, so pay attention. Because I only give the link after I sort of teach this, even though I'm not kind of teaching it right now, but you've heard enough to sort of know what, like at least one thing to do with this list. So jjflizanes.com/feelings list. That's feelings with an S. And just download it and make many copies of it. And the first thing you would do is just notice. I mean, step one is how I want to teach, I want you to hear a whole 30-minute teaching on how to actually use this in communication. But what we talked about today, it's really just identifying your needs. So I would just print a couple copies and get to the place of, hey, what needs do I have that aren't being met in my life right now as an ongoing theme? And then just start to circle them, because it'll give you a framework and a direction. You can start to figure out what strategies you can take to get the needs met by identifying what they are. Because if you don't know, like I didn't know I had a need for contribution until I was in a situation where it was shown to me. And I didn't even know what it was then. I had to use the list. I had to be like, I didn't know why I was frustrated. I didn't know why I was sad. It didn't make sense. And then when I finally figured it out and I saw contribution, I was like, oh, that's it. Then that gave me permission to stop trying to get two people who weren't interested in what I had that I was giving away for free. It's a funny story. Um, that I'm like, oh, well, let me go find someone that does want it. This is a simple answer to the question. This is a simple redirect. It's going to make a lot more sense and feel a lot better. But it also encouraged me to think bigger. It encouraged me to say, well, this is before the podcast, to think of, oh, well, how could I can make a school, I can make a nonprofit. Like I got really excited about how I could contribute on a much bigger level when I identified that it was an actual need that I had. I didn't even know. So that's the thing. People don't even know. How many people do I see on a regular basis that need space? Oh my God, maybe not you right now, but many people need space. They're so busy. They're so overwhelmed and consumed with all their to-do lists and all the things that are going on in their life. They don't have any space. So what is that? What does somebody need in that situation? They need space. So what would I say to do about it? Well, can you take a day off? Can you go into the woods? Can you go to the beach? Can you go to the spa? Can you figure out? I have an Airstream we just bought, and it's kind of going to be like a guest house, and we're going to rent it out on Airbnb and stuff. But tomorrow I have the day off, and I have some books to read in preparation for my next live event that I'm doing. And I can't successfully create new things in my space because I got a lot of stuff here, and I got my cats and my guy and my stuff, my computer. So I'm going to go get space in my Airstream, and I'm going to read these books in a non-attached way. So wherever you are, whatever you're dealing with, there's an answer, and there's several solutions for you. But you do have to first identify what's under the root, like what's the real need under the story, the conversation, the frustration, the pain that you're dealing with. So I'd recommend getting the list. And now if you get the list and you are also writing this down and you want to listen to an episode, so I have many shows, but my first show is called Fit to Love. It has like a little blue box around it. You can find it on my website, jjflizanes.com. And episode, I think it's either 113, 115, or 118. Sorry, I don't know. 113, 115, or 118. So you got to go all the way back, and there's like 700 right now. So we got all the way back to the 113 and find 3 steps to effective communication. And that podcast will explain in detail how to work this system in communication with people in your life, with your loved ones, with your people that you work with, and for you to get real clear about coming from that I position anytime you're upset or triggered or just sad and frustrated and confused about why you feel the way you feel. It'll help you out of that. And I think that's one of the most important things that we can do for ourselves. So it's like saying, I have a pain, or, oh, you know what? I scraped my arm, it's bleeding. Oh, well, like when you tell somebody you scraped your arm and you're bleeding, go wash it off and clean it up, put some ointment on it and put a bandage over it, right? Because you don't want it to get infected. That would be what like a normal person would say. But most of us, if we say, well, I cut it open, oh, well, blood dripping everywhere. So what? wouldn't be normal. They'd be like, why are you leaving it open? Why are you bleeding everywhere? Fix it. So that's my mentality. If there's something wrong, fix it. Don't keep walking around with it being wrong, because then you're only to blame if you're perpetuating it being wrong. No one's giving you the tools to fix it. So here's a tool. Please take it. Please use it. Please fix it.
Beautiful. So as we come toward the end of the conversation, though, if there's any other way that somebody can get a hold of you, or work with you, or find out what else you got coming up, go ahead and let them know.
Yeah, just my website, jjflizanes.com. I've got several free things there, a couple classes about health and about, relationships and love and money and podcasting. And then of course all my shows are there. Everything's there. jjflizanes.com, jjflizanes.com. And if you want the feelings and needs list, because you will not find it without this link, it's jjflizanes.com/feelings list.
Awesome. Well, thank you for the time. It was great to get to sit down and have a conversation with you.
Thanks, Mike. I appreciate it. I loved your background. I love the calm, grounded feeling I'm getting from your environment. And so that's very helpful. And I wish everyone could see it. I hope everybody can see it. And if not, go experience it, because nature's powerful.
It really is. Well, I hope that the grounding feeling carries with you throughout the day. Thank you.
Thank you.